All right, guys, it's time for the Next Level Guy Show, a men's interview, interest, and improvement-focused podcast featuring interviews with the greats from all industries to help you better your life. Each week, a new episode features an interview with one of the greats, covering all aspects of their story, from life hacks to tips and protocols that have allowed them to live life on the next level. We then highlight concrete action steps that you can use to improve your life. And now, your host, Ian Dawson Mackay.
Today's guest is Stephan Kesting, a father, firefighter, podcaster, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu legend. Stephan operates grapplearts.com, beginningbjj.com, and through his online instructionals, videos, DVDs, articles, and newsletters, he's helped tens of thousands of grapplers all over the world improve their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and submission grappling skills. I in particular owe him for his ones on sweeps and subs. I learnt more on these apps, not just technique pointers, but key concepts and movement fixes than I had in some classes to that point. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and has been training martial arts for over 30 years, where he's achieved belts in and is a certified trainer in a number of other martial arts. In my opinion, he's been a legend in the BJJ coaching scene, and his instructionals and articles are a must-read for anyone serious about improving their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And in this interview, we discuss multiple areas, such as his views on BJJ as a martial art, his amazing 1,000-mile by canoe trip into the Arctic, which he did completely alone, his kidney transplant, and the importance of working towards your goals. I seriously consider him one of the most interesting people in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and someone you need to follow to take your BJJ to the next level. And now, let's get to the interview. For those people who maybe don't recognize the name, who are maybe not into the Jiu-Jitsu sphere of life, how would you describe who you are and why you're so well known?
Well, those are a little bit, they're related, but they're different questions. Who am I? I am a father. I've been doing martial arts for just coming up on 40 years. I've done a ton of outdoor stuff. I'm a firefighter, and so I try to balance all those things, and often balance them kind of poorly. The reason I'm well known is because of the work I've done in the jiu-jitsu space, in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu space, with my site, grapplearts.com, my YouTube channel, and my Instagram, and my podcast, and all those things. And if people do a search for, my name and YouTube channel, they'll find that very quickly. So I think, I would love to be known for the writing that I've done on Grapple Arts, because I've done a ton of writing. But usually when people run into me on the street and recognize me, they're like, dude, I've watched all your YouTube videos. So that's the universe sending me a message saying, make more YouTube videos. And although I'm not going to stop writing, I do enjoy the writing as well.
Well, your video series on YouTube are phenomenal. You've got a kind of gift for teaching, but you kind of seem to be more of a teacher side of in a jiu-jitsu artist more than a competitor. Do you wish
I did. I went through the competition phase when I was younger, when I had more time. Before I had kids, in addition to the grapple art stuff, the online stuff, I also work as a firefighter. So that's a pretty busy schedule, trying to balance those three areas. And it used to be even more complicated because in addition to being a parent, I was also homeschooling my kids. So you combine a full-time job, firefighting, with a second full-time job, which is doing the videos and the online writing and the online courses and stuff. You end up with no time at all. So the competition thing has definitely taken a backseat. I've also been doing it a long time, and like Indiana Jones says, it's not the years, it's the mileage. And there's a lot of mileage on this body. There are a lot of injuries that if they got much worse, they would begin interfering with my ability to do jiu-jitsu at all. So you do a risk versus reward benefit. I think competition is an amazing thing. competition, if for no other reason, helps sharpen your training. It helps focus your training. If you know that you're going to compete in a month and a half, I guarantee you that your training is going to be more focused, more intense. There's going to be less screwing around, and you will train harder than you would if you didn't have that competition coming up. So even if you don't like competition, using a competition to focus your training is an effective hack. So that being said, it's been a long time since I competed. I enjoyed it when I did it, and I got better the more I did of it, if for no other reason than dealing with nerves. But yeah, it's something I don't have the bandwidth for, and I may not have the the remaining joint integrity for it either.
I mean, to be honest, it's you're the type of person that whenever somebody's starting new, they automatically get recommended to check out your videos. You seem to have this amazing way of breaking down the concepts of jiu-jitsu and making it so easy for a beginner to pick up. It's like that's your calling. You're passing on the torch of jiu-jitsu and the fundamentals and the concepts to a newbie, and you can't get higher praise than that. I mean, where does this personality come from? I think I've seen you mention in another interview, you've done a Masters of Science. That's possibly where your analytical kind of approach comes from. But were you like this as a child? What was your upbringing like? Did you have a kind of situation where you kind of learned concepts? Because you've talked about learning concepts better than learning tactics. Have you always been that kind of mentality when you come to like sports?
I think so, trying to find sort of the underlying connecting theme, right? There are some people out there, and I'm not even saying it's wrong, but there are some people out there who are technique collectors. And we'll just talk about this in the context of jiu-jitsu, but it's true in many other areas of life as well. And they're trying to learn this technique, they're trying to learn that technique, and let's learn 37 different attacks from the guard. Let's learn 18 wrist locks from top position. And that does work for some people. It's undeniable that it works because that's how a lot of people learn it, and that's how a lot of people teach it. I think being exposed to Danny Nosanto and the whole JKD mentality, where there's at least an attempt to organize things and to take a look at the connections, in Danny Nosanto's case, between different martial arts, right? Here's how Muay Thai throws an elbow. Here's how Filipino Kali throws an elbow. Here's how Indonesian Salat throws an elbow. Here's how Bondo throws an elbow. And then you can see the underlying similarities and the cross-cultural differences in those two things. I think that really helped me. And I really appreciated my first martial art was judo. But then I quickly strayed from the path and got into Kung Fu because everybody, when I was growing up, knew that Kung Fu was much, much deadlier than judo. Right? We've been brainwashed by countless Kung Fu movies where one guy defeats 10 guys. And, I was young and dumb and a teenager.
Did you have the headband?
I'm sorry?
Did you have the headband for it?
Oh, I went through headbands. Mostly in Kung Fu, we had the black jackets with the frog buttons in the front, right? So we, or depending on what school I was training at, we went traditional dress or t-shirts and Kung Fu pants and Kung Fu slippers, and going from there to a system or an approach where thinking was more welcome, right? Where questioning was inherently part of the process, was liberating. Because in traditional martial arts, you don't ask questions, right? You're lucky if you go and ask one question a month. And the question is never something like, I just don't think this technique would actually work. Because, best case scenario, you're getting kicked out of the school. Worst case scenario, you're getting knuckles to the face. So traditional martial arts often discourage the process of asking questions. And I think martial arts should, in fact, you should be allowed to ask questions. I mean, if you're going to say, I don't think this technique will work, there's probably a more polite way to phrase it. And then a less polite way to phrase it, I would suggest in general that you go with a more polite version, but you'll end up in less death matches that way. So as in terms of where this looking for underlying connections came from, maybe from there. I think to some extent the science background helped, but I think there are in other ways the science background has interfered with the ability to disseminate information online. If you take a look at my earlier videos or my earlier articles, I was still very much writing from an academic perspective. Well, there are 4 ways to apply this wrist lock, and the first way relies on flexing, blah, blah, blah. It's boring. So I think trying to be a little bit more engaging, trying to write in a way that's more internet friendly, that's been a detraining process. I've had to train myself out of what I was taught in academia.
Because I work with a lot of academics just now.
I'm sorry.
I could, well, I certainly know what you mean about that the lack of personality in the writing. Because I suppose you kind of got to be, completely.
Well, they're trying to be very precise. They're trying to be very precise, and I've spent enough time around academics that it is what that system encourages, a very rigorous approach where you're trying to be exactly correct. But is it engaging? No. Is it going to survive in a YouTube environment? No. You could be the most correct person, but if nobody's listening to you, then what's your message? How effective is your actual message? I'd rather be, more or less correct in what I say and have people listen and hopefully get off their asses and go train or go start jiu-jitsu or continue, not give up jiu-jitsu or go do something else and push themselves in some way than be 100% academically correct about, well, Stephan, when you say cardio, that's not actually correct because, in fact, you were doing anaerobic training and not aerobic training, like blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, right? Call it cardio and we're good.
Yeah, it's that kind of, they pick on like such small things and you're like, well, yeah, but, what's the overall message?
Exactly.
I mean, what's your take then towards jiu-jitsu compared to other martial arts? What was it about when, because you're a black belt in a couple of different martial arts, you've done a lot of cross-training, and I've noticed a lot of like the exceptional performers like yourself have done cross-training or have a history of variety of sports when they were younger. What was it about jiu-jitsu that kind of made you start leaning towards that wave? What was it about it initially that kind of inspired you to get drawn
initially,
into it?
100%, it was the undeniable effectiveness of it in a fight, either a consensual fight. Ian, do you want to fight? Yes, Stephan, I want to fight. Okay, let's fight, right? A consensual sparring match or fight or essentially a duel or a street fight type situation. And that was proven, at least to me, by a couple of things. Number one, it was the early Gracie in action videos that came out before the UFC. And it's just old footage of essentially a bunch of challenge matches that the Gracies had. And time after time after time after time, you'd have the capoeira guy do his jump, spinning, flicky kick stuff and then get tackled and it goes to the ground. And the capoeira guy would have no idea what to do. Or some kung fu guy there doing his fancy stuff, waving his arms around, then charge, tackle, or charge, clinch, go to the ground, and lose. Some karate guy would stand there, throw his punches, throw his kicks, and the jiu-jitsu guy would close a distance, either shoot a takedown, go to the clinch, they'd fall over, and the guy would win. So I think it's a little bit less accurate now, but when you're comparing sort of traditional martial arts where people didn't cross-train, the person who doesn't have a background on the ground is at a humongous disadvantage. Not all fights go to the ground, but most do. Not all fights start on the ground. It's true, but you end up there pretty often, and especially from for a women's self-defense aspect, not most rapes, like most rapes and most assaults end up on the ground. So the undeniable effectiveness of grappling in a combative sense was the thing that drew me to it first. at a larger level, it was also the testability of it, right? Coming from a background in both traditional martial arts and more modern martial arts, but you throw a punch and then I'm going to do technique number 3. I'm going to block here, I'm going to block here, I'm going to hit you here, I'm going to kick you in the leg, I'm going to take you down, I'm going to use this arm lock to break your arm, and then I'm going to finish you off with a hammer fist to the solar plexus, or whatever. That's all well and good. But at the back of your mind, you're always going, well, is this actually going to work? Is there a way that, it's too deadly to test because you're not going to let me, hammer fist you in the balls if we're really sparring. And the funny thing is, the techniques that we were shown, the ones that we could spar, they very rarely came out in sparring. Basically, if you put gloves on people and let them hit each other for real, it very quickly devolves to look like sloppy boxing or sloppy kickboxing. So that the testability of jiu-jitsu, where, I think I've got a better way to open the guard. I think I've got a better way to escape the armbar. We can test it at nearly full resistance. You can really try to keep your guard closed while I really try to stand up and break your guard open, and we'll have an answer. After 10 minutes of trying, and if I go with a couple different people, I'll have feedback. Again, this is the second time I've used this phrase. I'm not actually a new age flake, but you'll have feedback from the universe as to whether your brilliant idea is going to work or not. So that's really appealing, because even if the truth is something you don't want to know, it's better to know the truth, right? If you, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. If you're driving a car and you know for a fact that the seatbelt and the airbags that you're relying on to keep you safe don't work, if you know the truth that the seatbelt's broken and the airbag's deactivated, you're going to drive differently. You're going to, knowing the truth, you're going to take actions. Whereas if you just drive as if you're invulnerable, then you're much more likely to be in an accident and really suffer from that. So even if the truth is something that you don't like, it's better to know the truth. And I think jiu-jitsu provides that very, very quickly with reasonably low risk. Kickboxing also provides that. Boxing also provides that. If you think you've got this great Lomachenko-style feint to get behind me and land a combination, that's great, and we can go test it, and we can find out if that works. But the collateral damage of training boxing and kickboxing is things like concussions, things like chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, things like brain damage and early onset Alzheimer's, and very bad things. They can replace, they can repair most joints in the body to some extent. They can't do much about your brain. So I think there are other martial arts that offer feedback and ways to test. But I think in general, jiu-jitsu is a reasonably safe way to train at almost full power and be reasonably safe in the process.
Because that's the thing, the saying is everybody's got a plan till they're punched in the face.
Yes,
and jiu-jitsu is one of those that lets you go almost full force and intensity, but
well, that was
not
Mike
come away with
Tyson, wasn't it?
And that's what I liked about it, is like it allows you to actually mimic a fight, but controlled enough. It lets you get into that sort of primal identity, that kind of outlook, that psychological outlook, and be in the moment and all that kind of stuff, and dice it with death almost, in your head. But you're always in a safe environment, a controlled environment with a way out to stop it and stuff. And
yeah, it's called tapping out. Which is not to say. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, do you think that's what attracts a lot of guys to it? It's that kind of, because we don't have that rituals anymore to become men, because we don't have our major wars anymore, because we don't have the challenges our grandfathers and stuff had. We need a kind of a fight almost. We need a challenge, a deadly opponent to kind of feel connected to the world, or to feel masculine even.
I've definitely riffed on this topic before, and I think for a certain personality type, it's 100% correct. Whether I believe in the idea of creating challenges for yourself. Now, I mean, obviously I'm biased towards jiu-jitsu, but it doesn't really matter. If your goal is to go and run a 10K every week for a year, right? That is setting a challenge for yourself. And it's going to be reasonably difficult, and there is a chance of failure. You could get injured. You could decide that you'd rather Netflix, binge, and eat Doritos on the couch, because that is, in the moment, more fun than trying to breathe when your lungs are burning, when you're running and the weather's cold, right?
Sounds like a normal training session for me.
Yeah. I mean, eventually that becomes, you start taking a grim pleasure in that, but initially it's quite difficult. So it's a self-imposed challenge. Going and mastering jiu-jitsu is a self-imposed challenge. And there is, I thought about this in the context of rites of passage, right? As you kind of alluded to, historically was a very different time. Historically, there would be a time when a boy became a man, I don't know, when you went on your first raid, or when you crossed the equator with the British Navy, there was a ceremony, or if you were a young Spartan boy, you'd be kicked out of the community and hunted. Or if you were a Native American, I mean, you can't lump all Native Americans together because there were hundreds of different tribes with hundreds of different procedures, but at least some of them had some kind of vision quest moment when you would leave the tribe and you'd be out there on your mountaintop or in your cave and you're left alone. Right? It's inherently a bit more of a dangerous situation. You don't have the tribe to back you up. So there is danger, and there's a chance of failure. And when you come back, you're different. And we don't, for the most part, have this in Western society very much. I think people who join the army might have that. I have not been in the army, but I've gone and created that for myself when I was younger, both through jiu-jitsu and through really extensive solo canoe trips. I think women, historically, probably their rite of passage was giving birth. And I'm not an anthropologist. I don't know. This is just me speculating wildly. But, by the time that most men were going through this rite of passage, whether it be some kind of horrific African adult circumcision ritual where you weren't allowed to flinch or you'd be kicked out of the tribe, women were going through and having, giving birth to their first kid, which, would probably function as the same thing. It's difficult, it's painful, it could fail, you could die, and afterwards you're not the same as you were before. So I think people seek out things like jiu-jitsu because it does, as you pointed out, get to that primal. It's very primal, right? If you and I are wrestling, even if we're wrestling, lightly and having fun, and not every match is a death match, and not every match, well, no match you're really trying to break my arm, except maybe if we were in competition. But your body doesn't know that, your mind doesn't know that, and your ego doesn't know that. It's like, no friggin' way am I going to let Ian do an arm drag and take my back a second time this match. That's just not going to happen. And so we get into this, and what's more primal than wrestling? Every culture has a wrestling type of martial art. What do little kids do when they get together to play? They end up wrestling on the floor. What do adults do when they're sufficiently drunk? Especially adult males at a barbecue, they probably end up wrestling or shoving or jostling or. It's just such a primal way of, feeling your oats, and essentially it's a dominance game, I guess, right? A hierarchical game that you're trying to figure out. Well, he's better than I am in this, but I'm better than this guy. It's a very, very primal thing, and so I do think because it's difficult, because it can be painful, because you can fail. It does meet all those criteria for a meaningful, substitute for war, a meaningful substitute for, getting circumcised as an adult without anesthesia. I would rather do jiu-jitsu than go through that.
Well, I mean, this is why I find you one of the most interesting people in jiu-jitsu. Everybody else I would find would be talking about arm locks and oh, I'm doing this to compete, and maybe they talk about a bit of psychology on that, but you kind of go on a much deeper level. You've got such a warm and friendly way of doing it, but you really kind of go into a very deep philosophical approach, very analytical, and the real reasons behind a lot of the ways, and I think that's why it draws a lot of people in. I mean, would you say, in the sense that jiu-jitsu saved your life, during the time you were going through the transplant, your recent trip, that sort of thing? Was your use of martial arts, do you think that benefited you, that kind of helped you during that difficult time in your life?
Okay, so what you're referring to here is the kidney transplant that I went through about 4 years ago, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for people who don't know, I was born with a kidney condition that gradually, if you want to get technical about it, your kidney is made up of a whole bunch of little filters, thousands of little filters, and it filters your blood. And unfortunately, in my case, each occasional filter decided to turn into a big balloon instead. So instead of having my kidneys weigh about 1 pound, by the end they weighed about 10 pounds and we're down to about 12% function. So that I would have died, right? In a previous era, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, or even if I had the misfortune of being born in not as developed a country as Canada, or somewhere else in Europe or in the United States, if I had health insurance, I'd be dead. So, first and foremost, it's medical science that saved my life. Now you're asking.
My mum had.
Yeah.
Well, my mum had a similar thing. She had severe liver damage when the doctor gave her out of date medication.
Oh no!
And when I listened to your amazing podcast, on what you went through, it is breathtaking to see the items you went through and the strength that you had from it. It was a phenomenal video. That, I mean,
yeah. The martial art, to get to your question, the martial arts training for sure helped. If nothing else, to be stoic about the whole thing and to try and remain rational. Right? Like, you're going in for surgery. It's either going to work or it's not going to work. You're either going to come out alive or dead, and then the transplant's either going to work or it's not going to work. And it's a decision tree, right? If I'm dead, I don't have to worry about it. If I'm alive, well, what are the things I need to worry about? To what extent is it going to be functional after? But some of this is in your control, but a lot of it isn't. A lot of it really is just rolling the cosmic dice, trusting your surgeon, hoping that there's nothing weird medically going on. But there are some things you can control, right? You can go into it in as good a shape as you can. There's very, very few medical conditions where being in worse shape helps out the outcome of any subsequent surgery, right? So training jiu-jitsu and then doing other kinds of conditioning as I could, as my kidney function kept on dropping, was incredibly helpful, because although I was on death's door kidney-wise, I wasn't as terribly out of shape as some of the other people at that same kidney function level. Also, I think I was reasonably calm about the whole thing. And that just came, a friend of mine, Brandon Mullins, I've done a few instructionals with him, expresses it well. If you're caught in the bottom of mount, so mount is one of the worst positions you can be caught in jiu-jitsu. It opens you up to tons of submissions. In a fight, the guy can pound your face in. That's why it's rewarded. If we're in a jiu-jitsu match, you can't hit me, but if you get mount on me, you've scored a ton of points. It's going to be hard for me to come back from that. So if you're caught on the bottom of mount, you know what you need to do. There are some techniques that you can use to get out. They may or may not work. The guy may or may not be able to counter your techniques. You're in a really bad position, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to try. You know what you need to do. You need to work to escape mount. Will it work? Will it not work? You don't know. But the one thing that you know for sure is that by not doing anything, it's not going to get better. In the context of paddling, right, I did that big solo canoe trip this summer. My mantra was, the damn boat's not going to paddle itself. right? So any chance I got, get out on the water, and if it's paddling into a headwind and you're only making a little bit of distance that day, well, it's still more distance than you would have made otherwise. Trying to be stoic about it. So did martial arts save my life? Hard to say. Perhaps it helped me with remaining healthier up until the point of the transplant. I think it mostly helped with the mental aspect of the not freaking out, trying to make plans, trying to come up with a coherent response to the situation. Okay, I'm going to be probably this much crippled coming back from this. What's my recovery plan? Do I have all the systems in place? I mean, before I went under the knife there, I had about, I forget what it was, maybe 4 months worth of YouTube videos already filmed that came out. Because at the time, I didn't, I was very, very private about that. I didn't share, after the fact, now that I've survived, I don't mind talking about any aspect of that. At the time, though, I was like, well, first I'm going to survive this, and then I'll talk about it. So it really helped with maybe the stoicism going into it.
I mean, that's why it's difficult, because I have hundreds of questions on the transplant situation. I have hundreds of questions on the trips. I have hundreds of questions on grapple arts and building your brand, and hundreds of questions about jiu-jitsu. And that's why I'm so keen to have you on, that there's so many...
We'll just careen wildly between questions. They don't need to make any sense. And if people don't like it, they can get all their money back.
It was hard to kind of find a segue there, because I was so interested in your approach to jiu-jitsu, but I also wanted to talk about the transplant situation. I'd already thought, oh, this is at least 3 podcasts worth. I mean, that's why I found, like, the videos you put out are phenomenal. Like, you go into such a deep level, you're very vulnerable, you open up about it. Were they difficult to make? Was it actually appeasing to do these kind of videos? Did it help you?
My main thought in making the videos and podcasts I did about the going through the transplant process and sort of the coming back from that was to try and help somebody else. Because certainly I've met enough people going through similar things who are just completely, absolutely overwhelmed. It could even be surviving cancer, or trying to deal with a family member who's going through something terrible. It can seem totally overwhelming, and I thought that because I started talking about the transplant as I was planning this Arctic trip. So the two are not disconnected. They're very much connected. And in a way, being able to pull off 1,000 miles, so 1,600 kilometers in the Arctic, where there was almost as much upriver as downriver, completely isolated from most of it, was kind of a like, hey, I'm fucking back, right? Like if I can do this after a transplant, and if I can get back on the mats and do jiu-jitsu after a transplant, then there's hope for other people too. Maybe I'm more functional than some and less functional than others. It's funny, when I was going through the transplant, I don't follow rugby at all, but a rugby friend of mine was trying to cheer me up. Oh, dude, you need a kidney transplant. There was this famous rugby player, and I forget his name. I'm sure half your listeners will go, it was so-and-so, who had to have a transplant. He had a kidney transplant, even got back to playing rugby. I mean, he died, but he had to have a transplant too. I'm like, oh, thanks for the encouragement. Thanks for telling me about this guy who had a transplant, who then tried to play rugby again and then died. Yeah.
What our friends for it's.
Yeah.
I think it was John Olumu.
That sounds right.
New Zealand guy.
That sounds right.
I mean, that was I think that was the first one for a while that people kind of it really highlighted it. Yeah, like in the UK, we tend to, like when you're in high school and that, you tend to get to know about like organ donation and things like that. And that's the great thing about your video was that you're promoting the need for organ donation. You're highlighting, you're giving strength back to people that they can do it, that it's not the end of the world for them, that you can get through it. It may be a dark place now, but there is that place that they can go from there, and you're going to help like heaps of people through it. But do you think that self-reflection, did that give you a bit of closure on that issue? Did it help you see it differently? During that time compared to now, do you see it differently? Do you like learn from it in a different way, or?
I'm just so incredibly glad that I'm more or less functional now. I'm functional because my brother gave me a kidney. So I am like eternally indebted and extremely grateful to my brother. Actually, let me take this moment. I'm going to make a pitch, but it's not going to be the usual pitch that people make on a podcast. I don't know what the situation is in UK, and I don't know what your demographic is. I should know this, but I don't. In Canada, anyway, and in most American states, the organ donation process is opt-in. So you get driver's license, and there's a little box that you can check saying, yes, I give permission for my organs to be used if I die. And then if you die, I hope you don't, but if you die, then they go to your family and they go, hey, so-and-so checked off this box. Is it still okay if we harvest his organs? And then hopefully the family says yes. And I can tell you, because I've had a couple brothers die actually, but one of my brothers died in a horrific motorcycle accident, basically right in front of my parents' eyes. And so that was obviously crushing for them. But the fact that his organs, for sure his heart, and I think his liver as well, ended up in other people and helped save their lives, really helped my parents. So if you're worried about, what if I die? How, when I give away my organs, I can guarantee you that, well, in most cases, it'll really help the survivors because it'll help them make sense of it. Yes, Jimmy died, but Jimmy's death helped 2 other people, 3 other people survive. And that's much better than Jimmy's dead. End of story. So what I was doing and promoting actively for a while, and haven't for a while, but it's still 100% open offer, is that if people email me proof that they're an organ donor in whatever city, province, country they're in, that they've gone and signed up with the paperwork. And so I don't need your whole driver's license. I don't want to know where you live. You can black that part out and black out your driver's license. Just send me a picture of yourself and the little box that's checked saying so-and-so is an organ donor. If you email that to support@grapplarts.com, I'll give you any one of my instructionals for free. So some of those are a couple $100. So if you're even peripherally interested in jiu-jitsu or martial arts, that's a really good offer, right? You're doing the right thing. If you were to die, you'd be helping your family, and you get some jiu-jitsu in the meantime, which is going to make you less likely to die. So that's an offer that I haven't, I was pretty vocal about that a couple months ago, and we just got hammered with requests, and we were doing nothing else other than processing these requests. This is the first time that I'm remaking that offer, and it's a no-brainer, right? You'll improve your jiu-jitsu, or you'll learn some jiu-jitsu, you'll help somebody else, and you'll help your family.
Because that's something I remember we always said, when we were in school, was that you can't take it with you.
Yeah.
And the thought of like being able to change somebody's life, to give somebody a second chance or to save somebody. And I've always said, they can take anything they want from me as long as it's not pickled or buggered in some way. They can have it.
For sure. Like, and you can say, is this for transplant or is this for research, right? If I think research probably gives them a little bit more latitude to, pickle your pecker and stick it in a jar and people come by and comment, have medical students come by and comment out. But if you're just talking straight donation or transplant, like that's fine. And strangely, making this offer months ago, a whole bunch of people came and said, well, yeah, but what about is an ambulance or hospital, once they see that I'm a donor, are they going to take as good care of me? It's 1,000% yes. I work as a firefighter. We go to tons of medical calls. We work with ambulance people all the time. Never once in 20 years of doing that, 21 years of doing that, have we ever taken a look at organ donor status before deciding whether or not to take care of you or not take care of you. It's just so totally not an issue.
I mean, that's the bit that scares me. Is these like people in America who are going, "Oh, socialized medicine, no, it's complete nonsense." We have the National Health Service in the UK. It might be a bit crazy in the waiting list for some operations and stuff, but you can walk in and get seen by a doctor. You can get the X-rays for free. You're not going to go into like thousands and thousands of pounds debt. And it comes out of the taxes. We all pay into it, and we all use it as we need it. It helps save lives, and that scares me to think like some people are sitting waiting for treatment. They can't get it because they don't have insurance in America or somewhere like that.
It's insane. And I'm on a fair number of podcasts, and so this topic of transplants and medical systems comes up semi-regularly as I am a guest on other people's podcasts, and I find it really hard not to give a little rant about so-called socialized medicine, because of course we have that in Canada as well. And yes, 100% there are problems with it. Percentage of Canadians who would prefer to abandon this system in exchange for a more privatized system, I'd say is like 10%, maybe 15%. And they're only the rich people, or the people who are delusional about their own state of health, because it can all go for a giant crap instantaneously. Hey, you're 30 years old, and guess what? You've got cancer, and if you pay for this yourself, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're going to carry this debt with you for the rest of your life. I paid my taxes, so that is ultimately how this got paid for. But in the heat of the moment, when I was less able to work than I ever was, I think I paid a couple $100 of parking fees, because I had to go regularly to the hospital and to the clinic to get checked up on. That's not free parking. So I was paying, I think, $18 a day for parking on the days that I had to go there. And that's it. I'm totally happy to pay that parking fee in exchange for not coming out with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. And people have done some pretty convincing analyses to say that it's actually a more efficient per dollar spent. You actually get more medical care in a socialized medicine context than you do, which is not the story that's promulgated by a lot of the healthcare providers in the States. I remember listening to a fairly convincing argument about that by, I want to say, Sam Harris. Maybe it was Dan Carlin. I think it was Dan Carlin, actually. And he'd gone and looked at all the numbers, and fortunately it's not something I need to deal with personally on a regular basis, but I just know too many terrible stories of people who've had injuries that I've had from jiu-jitsu or from judo. And they're like, yeah, I just don't have any health care right now. And I'm like, this injury, if left untreated, just gets worse. A Lisfranc fracture dislocation of the foot, for example. Those don't typically get better. And yet this person's like, I've only got 3 more months at my job till I get health care. I'll just try and stumble on through till then. We've gone down a pretty major rabbit hole, but I'm going to find no disagreement from me on that topic.
It's time for a quick break. There are millions of potential products to buy, so how do you know which ones are worth your hard-earned money? Simple. You go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and explore those that will transform and improve your life. You'll find deals, listener exclusives, and special offers with some great companies. Recommendations are 100% honest and only on items Ian has tried or believes in. The companies showcased will make you a better man in all areas of your life. Simply go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and level up.
Well, I mean, this is what I was meaning, like that. Literally every avenue that I would chat to you, there was about 3 hours worth of material there. I mean, when you came out of it, out of the transplant, how did your sort of outlook on life change? Did you have a stronger relationship with your brother? Were you more sort of emotional about life and not wanting to waste a minute? Were you looking to sort of stop and savor the moments more? How did you change as a person, do you think, after the transplant?
Well, I've had a fair number of brushes with death, not necessarily my own death, but I have 5 brothers and a half sister. two of those brothers are dead. So they serve as, this idea of a memento mori. Remember that you're mortal. Remember that you're going to die. It can happen to young people that you're related to. I've watched a grandparent and a parent die in front of my eyes. Again, as a firefighter, we go to a fair amount of death and carnage, whether it's a motor vehicle accident or a CPR call that doesn't work. So I think these are really useful things. If you witness somebody dying, especially if it's a family member, but really anybody, but especially if it's a family member, they are giving you a gift. And they're giving you a gift of reminding you that life is short and that you're going to die. So I think I already had that firmly embedded by the time the transplant came around. Certainly I was incredibly grateful. And out in the Arctic this summer and getting back to the mats, it's like, oh my God, I'm so happy that I can do jiu-jitsu again. I'm so happy that despite everything I've been through, I can be out here, even if it's a shitty portage and the black flies are awful and they're, leaving bloody marks all over my body. I've chosen this, and it beats the alternative of being dead or being alive and never having lived, because I'm living right now. I think I had this pretty firmly established, though, prior to the fact. And I think that idea of somebody close to you dying being a gift is a really interesting way to reframe what's undoubtedly a terrible situation. Right? I mean, not very many people watch a parent die and go, that's great. Maybe if they've been suffering for a very long time, they go, it's better that they pass away. It still doesn't make it easy. And we talked a little bit about how society used to be. Most people used to die at home. And you'd have a whole bunch of brothers and sisters, typically. Families were much larger. A lot of those kids never made it into adulthood. So you would have had brothers and sisters die. You would have seen grandparents and uncles and aunts die. You would have seen, things got really bad and the Black Plague came through your village. There'd be bodies all over the place. There would be plenty of reminders that you're mortal. Whereas now, grandma gets sick, grandma goes to the hospital. Next time you see grandma, it's in the funeral home. That kind of insulates you a little bit from the reality that life is short. You're going to die too, and bloody make the best of it. And that's probably not by Netflix binging. And I don't know what it is for you, or for any specific person, but probably it's not by watching yet another episode of Netflix, or spending the entire weekend stoned out of your mind.
Because that was the thing. I had 3 grandparents die of cancer in the same sort of crossover year.
Oh my God! In the span of 365 days.
From April to start April. One had variant, one had sort of hardcore dementia and a stroke, but skin cancer, and one had bowel cancer. I know what you mean. It's that feeling of
dementia.
You're completely helpless.
Crap out of me. Dementia is, I think, the scariest illness. I just have this vision. When my mom was dying, she was in the hospital before we brought her home to die. I'd go in the evenings, and in the evenings they'd bring this guy out who had severe advanced dementia, and they'd have to chain him to a hospital bed, and there was nowhere else to put him. In the evenings, I don't know if they were cleaning his room, but they'd leave him in the hallway, and he'd be there begging and pleading, like, please, just let me go. They've chained me down. They've chained. I got to get out of here. They're keeping me here. And he I don't know what he was imagining was happening, but it was, man, if this ever happens to me, please walk up to me. Please, I'm begging you, and put a bullet in my head, because I'll thank you. From the next world, I will thank you. That's the scariest way to go.
Well, it happened to my grandpa, and he was such a strong, mentally amazing guy. And when I remember seeing it happen, slowly, and then when my gran had the start, it was just kind of out of nowhere. And I can remember sitting there, and it did give me that kind of jolt of, oh my God, this life is short. Nothing stays the same. I think I was 22 when I went to my first funeral, And I had a friend I worked with who'd buried both his parents by the time he was 15. You know, I think that's the thing, like you're saying, is we don't always get that kind of awakening, that kind of reminder that life is fleeting. You know, because we can order a date online, you can order food to your door, you can order a taxi to the bar and then a taxi home. You know, you don't need to actually do anything. We don't have our challenges. I mean, do you think that's why you did your trip? Was it your kind of your pilgrimage, your ritual, your kind of reminder that you were alive after the transplant?
Definitely a strong element of that. I mean, to be fair, I'd been looking at that region of Canada. I don't know how well your listeners would know Canada, but there's a great big, imagine it a giant square with a great big divot taken out of the top, and that's Hudson Bay, right? So that's connects to the Arctic Ocean. It's salt water. Like many places in Canada, it's named after a Brit who came over and then died. So that would be Henry Hudson would have explored that bay for the fur trade, I believe. It's gigantic. And so if you go just west of there, there's an area known as the Barren Lands, where there's no roads for thousands of kilometers. It's tundra. It's Arctic tundra. This is where the Inuit used to build their igloos and live out in the land and chase caribou. And there was an old route heading north through that area that I've been aware of for 25 years. But there were other trips to do, and then life got busy, and it's tough to take 7 weeks off from life in the middle of the summer. It's especially once you have kids. Hey kids, I'll see you in the fall. Bye. Hey ex-wife, I'm sorry I divorced you. Do you mind taking the kids for the whole entire summer so I can go off and do this thing by myself? So I was pretty verbal about the debt that I owe to people. Yes, I did this trip by myself, but it still relied on other people. It relied, first and foremost, on my ex-wife to take the kids, and I'm really grateful to her. And it took a lot of work to build up to that relationship. We're not in a relationship, but we have a relationship where that was even a possibility. So this is my thing to anybody who's divorced. Treat your ex-wife as nice as you possibly can, even if you don't feel like it, because you never know when you need her help to pull off that trip of a lifetime, whatever that is for you. If you want to go visit the pyramids, or you want to, cycle around France, or go hang out in Fiji for a month, you'll need somebody's help to do that. So yeah, I had been looking at this area, but then having survived this thing, it really brought it home. Like, dude, you're 50 years old, so I'm 50, and you're physically in the shape that you can do this now, and who knows what the future brings, right? I hope everything goes fine till I'm 185. Odds are against that. So now's the time to do it. So if I can seize the day at this point, after waiting for 25 years and building the relationships I needed for 25 years and figuring out how to get time away from the fire department for, that took a lot of setting up too. The logistics of something like that are immense, and the stars really did have to align. So on the one hand, I'm a huge fan of do it now, right? If there's an opportunity to do something, you're usually better off to go and experience it, to taste it, to try it, than spend tons of time debating it and analyzing from every angle. But sometimes the really big goals, they do just take time. There's a very, very large number of smaller steps you need to pull off. But for sure, the wanting to sort of prove to myself, if nobody else, that I could still do this, and and I guess proving to other people that yes, just because you've had something as major as a organ transplant, that it's not the end of your life, right? You can go on and do amazing things, whatever that amazing thing is for you.
So, what would you want people to remember from this? I was already thinking just now, I want to talk to you just for an hour on the trip, and
Sure.
talk to you an hour for the transplant, and really get home, inspire people from it, because you keep doing amazing things. You keep just grabbing life by the horns, and you've trained with some amazing people. I've got questions about how your own jiu-jitsu has evolved from working with them, but what's changed for you?
God help me, I think I'm going to quote Tony Robbins.
Dear, here we go.
I think it's a Tony Robbins quote. I'm going to attribute it to him anyway. That most people overestimate what they can do in a year, and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Most people overestimate what they can pull off in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So a lot of these things are the results of decades of work, right? Yes, I've gone and trained with some amazing people, but it's also taken decades to set up the infrastructure to do that. It's chipping away at the same problem again and again and again and again and again, and trying to make small incremental improvements. And if you're trying to make small incremental improvements in something day after day after day after day, they begin to add up and they begin to work synergistically together and exponentially together, and you end up with a much bigger body of work, or a much bigger accomplishment than any of the tiny little steps would indicate. So, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, I'm not so sure that I'm doing amazing things. I'm trying to move towards my goals a little, the major goals a little bit every day. And then every once in a while, I manage to pull off a coup. I manage to do an instructional video with a really big name in jiu-jitsu. Right? I did an instruction with Fabio Gurgel on pressure passing, on heavy pressure-based guard passing.
A phenomenal series.
Well, thank you. But that's based off of building up a YouTube channel over years, right? I think I started YouTube in 2006. So then, when I go in 2017 or 18, and I say, dear Mr. Gurgel, can we shoot a couple videos for my YouTube channel? It's now building on all the work that I've done for 15 years. So what is it? The best time to to dig a well is 10 years ago before you needed it. The second best time is right now. The canoeing, the trip, there's a fitness component to something like that. But I'd say the technical and logistical aspects of it are much more important. Knowing how to tie a rope to your boat so it's not going to come off when you're pulling that boat up a rapid. How to light a fire when it's been raining for 3 days. How to pitch a tent when there isn't a tree in sight and the wind's going 50 kilometers an hour. Not to mention all the whitewater techniques. All of those things were learned incrementally, right? That's one piece at a time. Logistically, figuring out how much fuel you're going to need. How many liters of fuel do you carry for a 50-day trip when you're planning on one hot meal a day? That's a logistical issue. How do I figure out how long this is going to take? That's based on experience. All these things, all these bigger achievements are based on slogging away in the trenches, making incremental improvements to small little things day after day. And finding, in the case of, the whitewater is an interesting thing because it kind of brings us back to where we started. When I was out on the Flé Louisa, it's a giant river, it's in the Arctic, there's nobody within several hundred kilometers in any direction. You're running whitewater that's difficult to scout, and so you're reacting in the moment. There's an element of danger. If you flip, that water is ice cold. You don't know exactly what's downstream. You could lose all your gear. Hopefully your radio works, but you could lose that too. And you could be severely screwed. So that's not actually the place to learn to paddle. Just like if, God help me, I get enough, I walk, we wrap up this podcast, I walk outside to my car and I get jumped and I fight for my life. That's not the time to learn how to fight. The time to learn how to fight is not when you're in fights. You're trying to find a safe sort of play environment where you can test it out and develop the skills and develop the reflexes and develop the timing, even though you could make an argument, yes, well, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you don't include eye gouging and groin biting, and that's would be the reality in a fight, is I would gouge your eyes and bite your groin. Well, you're also not going to be training very long, and you're not going to have very many training partners, and you'll get way less training than if you and I are rolling around. Oh, man, Ian got the mount at me again. I'll try and escape from the mount. Oh, look, I got out. Oh, what, he's using a butterfly guard pass on me. I'll use this guard pass. Now, if I'm lucky enough to get to the side, I'll try and take your back. By playing in that safe environment, we can then train ourselves to have the base of reaction times or base of reactions and sensitivities and problem-solving abilities that we could then use in the dangerous situation. Similarly, my paddling skills with the Thle Louisa and the other rivers weren't built up entirely in those dangerous situations. I was out, taking a plastic boat with friends, and we're wearing dry suits and we're wearing helmets and we're screwing around in rapids that we would never run in quote, a real trip, because it's pretty difficult. So then we're developing our timing and our technique there. Then you can take those skills and transplant them to a more dangerous environment. So I think that idea of developing the skills you need for the big event, whether that's one of the few street fights that I hope you're in ever in your life, or doing a great big canoe trip up north, or I don't know, a catamaran, sailing your catamaran down to the Azores. Hopefully you've developed those skills in a safer environment, a fun environment where you can play a little bit, where the consequences of failure are minimized. Because that allows you to push the limits. And it's like that old quote about how to make toast. You do it till it burns, and then 30 seconds less. You need to be able to play in an environment where the cost of failure is reasonably minimal. And then you'll develop the skills that you can then, with slight modifications, deploy in a real situation.
I love that, because I actually have a question that was saying, do you see a likeness to your trip to Jiu-Jitsu? The problem solving, the challenging and fluid changing environment, the dangers of the water and wildlife, being like the dangers of getting choked out, the isolation, being like your own development, the danger side of it linked to like your job and stuff. And I think you just put that very articulate and very kind of beautifully put that.
Well,
we look at these sort of things as amazing and life changing, and to you they're just events in your life, and we think that we should be doing all these things now, where, like you're saying, these are kind of like 10 years in the making. And what would you, I know we're coming up to our time limit just now, but what would you want people to remember? Because we've got to go on and go into proper detail about everything. Mm-hmm. And I find you such an interesting guy. You've made my jiu-jitsu like 1,000 times better.
Well, thank you so much.
I've been a subscriber for years. I don't think I could have found a better coach at the start. You really helped me out, and your series is on my phone about like your submissions with the Brandon Millens. I've looked at your different guides on the fundamentals, and every time I watch it, even now that I'm like quite high up blue belt, I can go back and find out something else. I can see them on different levels.
Well, that's the thing. It's never. I mean, when I get my black belt, then I'll know everything. Bullshit. I mean, it really isn't like that, especially in a live martial art where things are continuously changing and where the art is continually evolving. Like, maybe you could know everything if you're doing some ancient form of Japanese swordsmanship where you got to learn the katas better. Maybe. I'm sure the jiu-jitsu people would disagree, or the traditionalists would disagree that you're always learning and refining. But at a gross level, next year, there'll be techniques that don't exist this year or that aren't well known this year. You better have at least kept track of what's going on. So that can be a little bit intimidating. What would I leave people with? Well, I mean, the pithy statement is do jiu-jitsu. it, but I'd say at a more fundamental level is find something that challenges you. And, yes, I would prefer for it to be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it doesn't really matter. It could be trail running. It could be trying to become the very best grower of roses that you can be. You could be going deep into, I don't know, raising honeybees. I don't really care. Like I think it's very important that people have physical outlets, because so many of us lead sedentary lives now. So in that sense, jiu-jitsu would be better than raising honeybees. So ideally, raising honeybees and working on your 10K time, or raising honeybees and deadlifting. But find something that challenges you. I think we are physical beings. We've evolved over, well, billions of years, but human beings have been around for a couple 100,000 years as anatomically modern human beings. Most of that time we've been out doing things in our body, and now most of us sit behind a screen for huge parts of the day, except for the parts of the day when we're driving our cars or sitting on the train. I think to feel alive, you need to find a way to challenge yourself physically. So go and try out a CrossFit gym, go and do a jiu-jitsu class. And people are going to say, well, I don't know what CrossFit gym to try, or I don't know what jiu-jitsu class to try. Well, remember what I said, that it's much better to go and taste something than it is to spend endless time analyzing and researching. I mean, yes, you should analyze and research too, but if there are 4 CrossFit gyms or in your neighborhood, go and try them all out. The value of experiencing that firsthand for an hour and seeing, oh, this instructor's a real jerk. Oh, everyone here seemed really nice. Or going and trying each of the 5 martial art gyms within, I don't know, a 20-minute radius of your house or half-hour radius of your house. You'll know much more at the end of that process than you would ever learn by looking at every single Yelp review and every single Google review and, Googling what's better, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Hung Gar Kung Fu. Right? Somebody will have pontificated about that, but they have an agenda. Go and experience it. Go and feel it, and then make your decision. So find something physical to do, especially if your job is mostly sitting in front of a screen or driving a computer.
Yeah, it's almost like, go and get an experience, go and do something and actually enjoy life and do something in life rather than stagnate in front of a screen.
Everybody, I stagnate in front of a screen too, right? Like, how did I build grapplers? I sat in front of a screen typing away at 2:00 in the morning to write an article, to edit a video. I'm not saying
but you're working towards a passion though as well.
It is, but you got to just balance it, right? We have mental and physical components, and if you want a spiritual component, although I would, whether you combine that with the mental component is up to you, but you got to feed all those different areas of yourself. So I think most of the people listening to this know that they should be doing something physical. Hopefully, most of them are, and that's great. And then take yourself to the next level mentally as well, right? Even if your job is, I don't know, working in a parking garage, right? You're just sitting there watching cars go in and out all day long. Awesome. First, what can you do to improve that? What can you do to work towards that perfect job? And you've got time, right? You've got time. You can work. You could either just spend that entire time surfing Instagram, or if you're interested in, it's the second time I've used beekeeping as an example. If you read for an hour a day on beekeeping, and then when you go home in the evening, you tend to your hives. I guess that's what beekeepers do. By the end of that year, you'll know more about beekeeping than 99.99% of people in society, and you'll be an expert. And then, maybe you can work towards doing that full time instead of working the parking lot. But you're using that time sitting there in the parking lot working towards whatever it is that you want to achieve.
And do you think, if you look at what bees are capable of doing and how we need them for our whole ecosystem, pretty much, it's quite impressive that you picked that.
It was just I just had a long debate about the effect of glyphosate pesticides with a farmer, and so that's just fresh in my mind. He acknowledges that bee populations are crashing, but denies that the glyphosate pesticides have anything to do with it. So I need to go do more research in my spare time, which I have very little of.
I mean, that's why I generally consider you like one of the most interesting people in jiu-jitsu. You go into a deeper level about everything, and as we find out more about you with the trip, with the transplant, with the whole side of things, I can understand that the love of your fans and the interest, and I could go on for hours about the different topics. So we've definitely got to do this again. It's been an absolute honor.
Let's pick a topic next time, and we'll try to keep me from wandering down a rabbit hole. And that way, if people are not interested in jiu-jitsu, they can not listen to it. If they're not interested in, extreme medical procedures and ripping an organ out of one human being and jamming it into somebody else and the weird physiological things that happen, they can not listen to it. And if they're not interested in, polar bears and caribou in the Arctic, then they can not listen to that either. This has been a great get to know you episode, and I've been following you on Twitter for a while, so it's great to reach out and connect.
I mean, that's what scared me, was how to make this general when there was like every topic was something I was so deeply interested in. Well, until we can get that going again, what ways can people keep in touch? How can they, find your instructionals, connect with you in social media, find your website, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, if they can't find me with Google, then I'm not doing my job, but I'll give them a head start. Grapplers.com is the main hub site. That's obviously mostly devoted to jiu-jitsu and martial arts training and MMA training in general. So grapplearts.com. I am on Instagram, Stephan _Kesting. I do have a podcast. If people search for the Strenuous Life podcast, they'll find it. Mostly we focus on jiu-jitsu, but I've gone on some pretty major tangents, and like you, if there's somebody interesting, I'll talk to them if I think it'd be interesting for the people who listen. What else? If they're interested more in that Arctic trip I did, if they go to grapplearts.com/solo, they'll find an article. That's a work in progress. It's not edited up as nicely as I would like, because it's basically a bunch of transcribed posts from the field. So I'm still working on that, but you see some photos and get the gist of some of the writing that I did while I was out there. grapplearts.com/solo. I think that's mostly it. I've got apps on the App Store and the Android, the Google Play Store that take you through various jiu-jitsu techniques. And
I mean, I think you're underselling just how good they are. They, I would say that basically you made me get my tabs and my white belt quicker than I was ever going to. I was lost in a sea of just nonsense. I didn't know where I was going or anything, and your instructionals broke them down. You kind of made even somebody that was 6'3", fat, out of control, didn't know what they were doing. You made me understand jiu-jitsu technique, concepts, your instructionals, your apps are phenomenal, and if you're not using them, I think people are really cutting their leg off. It's your stuff is phenomenal.
I'm glad that they helped. My basic premise is I try to produce stuff that I would have found useful, or that I do find useful in real time. And I think there's just so much information out there that context becomes more important than the information itself. Because if you and I went on YouTube and we were training together, we could find a new technique on YouTube, watch it. I could do it twice, you could do it twice, We could find another video on YouTube. I could do the technique twice, you could do it twice, and we could pretty much continue forever because people are always adding new stuff. Would that make us any better at jiu-jitsu? Not really, because we would just have first of all, we would never remember anything because it's just a bunch of random scattered techniques. And two, we wouldn't have a larger context within which to put those techniques. Like, hey, here's something cool. Here's another cool thing, right? Only extremely ADHD people would benefit by that, and probably not even then. So, yeah, I think the context is important. Well, if people want the apps, the one that's mostly free is the roadmap for BJJ apps. That's grapplers.com/roadmap. And that kind of gives you the bigger picture of how the positions of jiu-jitsu tie together and why one position is better than the other and what your goals should be in every position. If you're in top mount, what should your goals be? If you're on the bottom of side mount, if you've got the guy in your guard, what should your goals be? How are you going to accomplish that? And then there's the grapplers.com/master app, which took a ton of development time because there's just so much. There's more than 500 free minutes of instruction there. And then if people want to get extra stuff, they can. And that app took a ton of time and money and research and development to create. So we're still working on improving that. But yeah, let's absolutely do this again, and I promise, and you'll promise, that we'll specialize in a topic and mostly stick to that for at least 65-70% of the episode.
I mean, it generally has been a true honor to have you on. You were one of the people that I first wrote down that I wanted to have on because you personify what the site's about. People who are living life on another level, who are, helping others, inspiring others, and they're like superstars in their chosen field. But
so now you just need to get Elon Musk on the show, and then you'll be complete.
Well, yeah, I don't have any joints for him, unfortunately.
Well,
go ahead. I was always interested. Did the William Gadd interview have anything to do with your trip?
No, I had pretty much had that planned. Will Gadd is a really crazy high-level ice climber, and and we were talking about one of my distant plans, which was crossing Greenland, and he started giving me the gears about, well, if it really is a goal of yours and you should be doing it, why are you delaying? And part of the answer was, well, I had this other trip that I was planning. So I'll say with the Will Gadd interview, the thing that helped me with the most, preparing for a big climb. And I was expecting and wanting at some level an answer like, well, first I start doing pull-ups, and then I'll start doing fingerboard training, and then I'll do pull-ups wearing, with an ice axe, and then I'll add 10 pounds to a backpack. And his answer was essentially like, look, logistics for a big climb, logistics are first, second, third, and fourth. Training for it physically, that's way down the line. That's way down the line. That's way down the road. The logistics are really where it's at. So then in getting ready for my own solo celebration of not dying trip this last summer, that was a really useful thing to keep in mind because the logistics were so unbelievably complicated and that my time was not at all sufficient, that I did the right amount of logistics. I did not do the right amount of, or as much physical preparation as I would have liked. But the logistics were more important because your body can toughen up as you're paddling day after day. But if you don't have, if your satellite radio doesn't work, if your satellite phone doesn't work, if your tent repair kit doesn't exist, if you don't have the right tool to repair your boat, you're screwed. Right? You can improvise to a certain extent, but the logistics are way more important than the physical preparation, although physical preparation is also important. So that was a nugget that Will Gadd dropped that really helped me with feeling better about how I was allocating time to get ready for that.
Well, that's it for another week, and thank you for listening. It's now time to take what you've learned and use it to develop and enhance your life with the key points mentioned. Listen, try it, embrace it, use it, and crush it. Now's your time to hit that next level in your life. If you liked this episode, then please leave a comment on the show notes or a review of the show on your podcast platform. Everything helps evolve the show. Until next week, keep seeking the next level in your life.